senior advisor to President Obama, told reporters, issuing this warning to Congress that, you remember, the House passed cap and trade, but the Senate has not yet. Quote, if you don't pass this legislation, then the EPA is going to have to regulate in this area, and it is not going to be able to regulate in a market-based way. So it's going to have to regulate in a command and control way, which will probably generate even more uncertainty. Continued uncertainty over what the country's energy and environmental policy is going to be is probably the biggest deterrent to investment of all. Passing this legislation so you're not in a situation where you have continuing uncertainty is key. Sounded like the threat to us. We're back with the panel. Charles?
A threat and an amazing admission. It admits, A, how bad the law in the Senate today that's being held up, cap and trade, is in and of itself. It's going to kill jobs. But secondly, if you don't do that, we're going to do something worse, impose the EPA regulations, which is cap without trade. There isn't a market mechanism. You can't sell or purchase a permit to emit CO2. So it's command and control, which is a polite way of saying Soviet control, meaning it's all regulation, it's all sort of arbitrary on the part of the EPA. It's an amazing admission, and it is a kind of blackmail. Either you do this in the Senate and pass a bill, or we're going to do it unilaterally. The problem here is it really is constitutionally obscene. If you're going to revolutionize our economy, as you will, by regulating and taxing carbon. We are a carbon-based economy. It will affect every aspect of American life. You ought to do it in a way that is through the Congress as an expression of popular will, and not by arbitrary administrative action. I think what Congress ought to do is to pass a law, a one-page law amending the EPA, the original legislation, which would say and restore its original intent. This law doesn't apply to CO2 and exclude it from the jurisdiction of EPA. And then the blackmail ends.
Mort, I mean, we assume that these comments, these discussions happen behind closed doors, but to hear it being told to reporters was pretty stark.
No, it was an ultimatum to Congress that either you do what we want you to do, or we're gonna blow up the whole country. I mean,
or the economy fails.
Exactly. I mean, here we are in the midst of a recession, and you're going to have the EPA now. What exactly the regulations are going to be like, we don't know. And Lisa Jackson, the head of the EPA, said that she was going to be quote unquote sensible about all this, and it was not going to apply to small businesses and medium-sized businesses. So we don't know exactly how draconian she's going to be. But this threat from the administration sounds very draconian, that they want the EPA to go full force, command and control, that kind of word. I mean, it's meant to be a whip on the Congress. But what can the Congress do? I mean, they're bogged down in health care right now. The year's going to end. They won't be back until January. It's going to take forever for the Senate to pass a cap and trade. So I don't know why they made this threat.
Yeah, exactly.
At this point.
What's behind this, Steve? I mean, listen, the prospects politically on Capitol Hill for cap and trade legislation, climate change legislation right now are dim at best.
Sure. I think there was a domestic audience and an international audience. The domestic audience was Congress. The international audience was in Copenhagen. And what they've basically wanted to be able to say was, look, we are getting tough. We are making threats to Congress. We are telling them they need to pass cap and trade legislation or else. And Lisa Jackson, I mean, interestingly, on Monday, she said that we really wanted this finding before we went to Copenhagen, so that we could sort of tout it there. And then today, in a speech today, she said, well, no, this is all just a coincidence. So they're not even clear on that. But importantly, on the actual threat, I think Republicans would be wise at this point to call their bluff. It takes so long to go from this kind of a finding to the point where these regulations would actually be implemented that there's no way they could do it within the next couple of years.
Not to mention the lawsuits involved here. Quickly, Charles, there is this disconnect between the president talking about jobs, and how he's going to turn the economy around, and then a threat like this to Congress to act on something that even this administration official says could potentially threaten jobs.
Yeah, pass a bill I want, or I'll destroy the American economy. Interesting threat. But look, all of these contradictions are happening in other areas as well. In the health care reform, in the Reid bill, you've got an increase in the payroll tax in the middle of a recession. While the administration is talking about, on the jobs issue, of giving a tax holiday on payroll tax. So it's utterly contradictory. It's that the administration has an agenda. It's health, education, and energy. It knows the window is closing. It's got a whip hand today, and it wants action, regardless of its effect on the economy.